So I welcome you to this workshop. My name is Natasha Nika and I represent School of the Future International Academy, in short, Sophia. Before we move on to the main part of this workshop, we would like to speak to you a little bit about the organization, share some information for you in order to know who we are and what we do in general. And then I will give the floor to Mr. Thomas Tsoulias. He's our presenter for today, and we were very happy and proud to have him on board for this workshop. I'm going to share my screen and share a presentation of the organization. So we are Sophia. Sophia stands for School of the Future International Academy, but since a lot of us have are Greek, Sophia also means wisdom for us. And wisdom is what we aspire to share with other people. And this is what the community we create tries to find, seeks to find. Sophia is a non-profit, non-governmental organization. We are registered in London, UK, but we operate internationally. We envision a world where education, through the continuous evolvement and transformation it experiences, will support every student to achieve his or her goals. And in order to do that, we have established a carefully designed and awarded education and and administration model for schools. Having this as a guide, we organize a lot of activities that we try to help various stakeholders of education institutions like school principals, school teachers, parents, students, individual teachers, to progress, to change the ways they work and develop as individuals and professionals. We are educators, engineers, sociologists, consultants, technology buffs, and all of us are agents of change in our community. So what we want to see is change in the global sphere of education in general. We have gathered our activities around three main pillars. The first pillar is consulting and mentoring, and this is where we put a lot of emphasis on building personal relationships with school leaders from all over the world. So what we do there is that we do have a mentoring for school leaders program, through which we provide school principals and the leadership team of schools with mentoring and with opportunities to improve the way they operate in different areas of their school. To do that, we have developed a school self-assessment tool. This school self-assessment is online on our website and it's free. Like, if you want to use it, you can go later and see it. I can leave the link to the chat. This is our contribution to the global educational community. This is a tool that can help principals sit down calmly and reflect on everything that happens in their schools, from budget to pedagogy, from technology to safety and security processes. Everything is there, and the school principal who completes the questionnaire, in reality it's a very long and detailed questionnaire, the school principal who completes it at the end gets a report on what they can do tomorrow, to which areas they need to go tomorrow and make changes and implement changes. In order to help them, we sit down together, we see these areas that they have prioritized, and we provide them with detailed and personalized instructions on what to do to improve their operations. This program is completely free. We encourage all of you to contact us if you know anybody, to share it with your network, and encourage everybody who feels they would like to be mentored to contact us. We do have mentoring programs for educators, but they are not running at the moment. At the moment, we're focusing on school leaders, as we think that they are the ones that can make decisions and changes in their schools. Then we do training and communication. This workshop is part of this pillar in reality. In our workshops, we try to provide knowledge and provide insights on different types of topics that, of course, are new or are of interest to our community. We record podcasts, we do speeches, and of course, we have our annual online summit called Bridge the Gap every November. This year, Bridge the Gap focuses on students and teachers' well-being. Again, I am encouraging anybody who feels that has something to say on teachers and students' well-being to contact us, as we are still in the lookout for speakers for this event. And we will be able to share with you more regarding this very soon. The third pillar is collaboration networking. This is where we collaborate with other NGOs, like the one that we have collaborated today, with other European organizations and European funded projects, or local funded projects, or local research, whatever. This is the area where we don't work alone, but we work in close collaboration with others, and we are very, very happy with all of our collaborations. All of the details for our programs can be found on our website. So I will leave it in the chat now for you to check and find out more. I'm going to leave my personal email address as well. So if you feel you need more information regarding one of our programs, please feel free to contact me at any time. Thank you so much for the time and the attention. Now we're diving in today's topic. Today's topic is gamification in education, and we're very happy to welcome on board Mr. Thomas Tsoulias from London.
Thank you so much, Natasha. Welcome, everyone. My name is Thomas Tsoulias, Thomas Tsoulias in Greek. I have been working with gamification education for the past decade. In my free time volunteering, I have founded and worked with an organization called Afixis, which our aim was to transform education, mainly through gamification. If I may share my screen, and we can take a look at a presentation, diving into the slideshow. If there's anyone who is not able to see the presentation, leave a comment in the chat. When I'm not fighting educational crime in the night, I'm a data developer at SEGA Europe. This is my main job. But for the past decade, Afixis has been my passion project. We have, along with a team of 40 people from all kinds of backgrounds, all kinds of subjects, created and delivered educational gamified experiences, let's say, both in classroom and outside the classroom. You can see some pictures here, mainly from the Model Hellenic Parliament simulation, which was a simulation and still is a simulation of the Hellenic Parliament, of how it works, aimed at teaching students how democracy works in action, modeled after our Harvard Model Congress. We have run hackathons, we have run simulations of courts for high school students, where we aim to teach them essentially how law works, how arguments are developed, and how to speak and fight agoraphobia. We have done a lot in the past 10 years. We're continuing to work with volunteers in Greece and abroad. Our experience from gamification is that it's just one of the ways that games and education can come together to help the learning process. In my experience, there are 3 ways that games come near education. The first one is purely games, like you're playing a game. For example, the first image you can see a screenshot from Civilization 4, one of my favorite games growing up, and a game I credit more for learning history than my actual classes. Players may experience a game that has a lot of details, for real life details, and through the interaction may learn things. However, the games are not aimed at education, so They are not a tool that you can use in classroom alone. You can't expect a student who plays a game to learn exactly what you want them to learn. It's more of it kind of happens. Which is why there was a second idea in the gaming world to create educational games, edu games. These were games that had the specific aim of learning something. Most of them were not very successful exactly because the primary aim of a game is to entertain and not to teach, but some of them were. And there were games that actually taught a lot without being educational games, but maybe we can classify them as educational games simply because they were so good at doing that. An example of this is the very popular game Minecraft, which allows the players to create buildings, anything that can be built, basically like gardens, libraries. It was so good that architectural schools used it to actually teach architectural principles to their students. But it still remains a game. And there is a third element, which is what we call gamification, and what we are all here to talk about today, which is essentially, very simply, taking a look at video games, seeing what makes them so successful, what makes them so interactive, and taking away these principles and implementing them in the real educational process, in the classroom mainly, and in other educational process, workshops, conferences, you name it. But mainly we will focus on the classroom because it is the common, essentially, element between all the educational systems. Wherever you are in the world, there is some sort of educational system that features some sort of classroom. People going in the morning, following a specific subject for a specific amount of time, and coming out and being tested on it. But gamification, although we consider it as the applying of these elements in education, differs a little bit from games, and this is very important to note. In my experience comes primarily, and I have essentially developed these observations from implementing two very specific programs with Afixis. The first was the Protagoras Moot Court, which was and is essentially a simulation of the Hellenic courts, the Greek courts, combined with debate. So students took the roles of lawyers and witnesses and judges, and they had to argue cases as if they were debating, but the structure was more of a courtroom, so there was more of a theatrical element to it. Students got roles, so the gamification came from exploring a subject that you would otherwise explore, I guess, in a classroom of language or essay, but in a more interactive way. And the model Hellenic Parliament, which was a simulation of the Hellenic Parliament, the Greek Parliament, which allowed students to essentially explore how to form arguments, how to solve problems, which is supposedly the main point of politics, and how to properly behave and discuss solutions, and explore the law of the land, make law as well. But we used a point system as well. We used a lot of gamification elements, and I will talk more about this in the coming slides. Just want to mention that these are the two main grounds, let's say, my two main research grounds, along with proper research in academic literature and discussion with teachers and students. And the main thing about the gamification, and this is the main essentially core element of gamification that I want to set here and we will use in the following examples, is that, first of all, it's at the same time, well, an art and a science. There are ways to implement it, and we will see specific examples. There are certain key elements, key data points that you can measure, how successful it is. You can take interviews with the students, you can see their scores, etc., etc. But at the same time, like all games and movies and anything you enjoy, it can also be a work of art. It can also be, and by that I mean a personal choice. Some of the gamification ideas you will see around may be good for one classroom, may not be good for another one. It depends on the level of your students, what they are studying, your personal taste as well. You may want to apply a moot court in your classroom to discuss a famous case instead of just teaching about it, but also your student may not be that very interested in that. Or you may be in a jurisdiction that people don't really believe in the efficiency of the state, so they may not want to discuss it in such an element, may cause problems with the parents. So it's up to you essentially to figure a solution based on the things that you will see around, that you will find online, that we will discuss today. But at the end of the day, also your personal preference, things that you are comfortable with and a way that you are comfortable with. And it depends also on your skills as well. You may be very good with video production. You may want to create a solution, a software that will help the students. This is what we did. You may not want to do any of that. You may want to follow a traditional pen and paper approach. That is also great. That's also fine. And there are resources for that as well. So it depends on your personal taste as well. It is also not always quantifiable. Although you can quantify things in education like grades, like most common example, it is also important to notice that in education in general, people learn in all sorts of ways. And sometimes pure exploration and enjoyment has its own educational value, which cannot be quantified. We can't really tell how much someone has enjoyed it or how much giving someone free rein to explore an encyclopedia, let's say, has them gaining the knowledge or gaining a skill. And testing is not always giving that to us, but we do have KPIs and we do have ways to quantify it. But at the same time, we must always remember that making a collaboration between grades and enjoyment, exploring and learning is always a good idea, no matter how able you are to study that. But the main difference between games, which is essentially where we take our ideas and the useful elements for education, thus gamification, is that education is not always enjoyable. A video game is something you will pick on your own, you will play at home, a movie the same, a book the same. Education is not that much so, at least in the classroom, there are strict frameworks. You have to teach something over a specific period of time, there are deadlines. Usually most ministries of education or other regulators have a national curriculum that they expect you to teach and that you have to complete specific parts of the material by a specific amount of time. So this is very important to remember. This is actually one of the points that most people sometimes fail to get through into their logic. You can't expect education to be as fun as a game, and you can't expect people to just enjoy it. For me personally, the point of gamification is making the educational system as much fun and enjoyable and efficient as possible so that the students will not mind the bad parts, will not mind that they have a deadline, will not mind that they have to pass a test or that they are gaining a specific grade. It will be in general an enjoyable situation, and the bad parts or the negative parts or the boring parts will just pass through as something that is part of the package. So bearing all of this in mind, we get a clearer sense of what gamification can achieve. We want to improve the educational system, transform it, but it will not become like a game unless, of course, these strict limits are lifted, which then we're talking about a whole uprooting of the educational system from ground zero, and this is not what we're discussing right now. Speaking of elements, what we're essentially taking from the games, I want to give an example of why we're choosing games, why gamification, why not choosing something else, another part of the human experience, why not movies, why not books, why not like making education more like going for a walk in the park. What people have been noticing for the past few years is that the behavior of players. So here we see this is a photograph gallery. This is some photographs that a photographer called Phil Toledano made a collection of. The collection is called Gamers. I have the link if anyone is interested, and very happy to share afterwards. So Phil Toledano had people playing games, and he took photographs at critical junctures of the player's experience. In the first photograph, for example, you see someone who is very happy. In the last one, someone who is obviously failing. For me, the most interesting part is the middle photograph. This is a player at what we call in gaming an epic win moment. So essentially that after a lot of effort and after a lot of failing, they are at the point that they are experiencing a massive win. And you can see that their eyes are dilated, like they're very focused, their nostrils are up. They are in the moment. And it is this kind of results that people thought, you know what, can we replicate this in experiences outside gaming? Can we replicate this in industry? Can we replicate this in education? And thus gamification was born essentially. That was the main idea, how we can make our learners, our students, experience this kind of moments and be so immersed in the moment that the learning process will be very efficient and very fast. They will learn what we want them to learn. They will learn more than we want them to learn. It will be great. It will be exciting. And this is what essentially we're trying to do. Both we, I mean, as Afixis, the organization, and in general, we educators who want to achieve this result in education. Bearing all of this in mind, and through my experience for the past decade, both from organizing these programs, designing them, talking with teachers, talking with students about their experience, and academic research, I have come away with more formally gamification principles, more informally things I learned along the way. And I would like to share this today with you. I think they will be valuable, at least interesting, I guess, and maybe you can take some things away from this. I try to incorporate some examples as well of what you could do in classroom very easily, like without a lot of resources. So here it goes. Number one, and this is more of a founding principle, is that the learner will trust you in your learning method and process at the beginning. I think this is something that teachers know intimately in the beginning. So you start with a classroom and they're very willing to work with you. But as you go along, this may change. Basically, it's the same in gaming. And I think the parallel here is very strong. So essentially, when you're designing a game, and this is an example I love, I have actually taken this from a very famous speech at the Game Developer Conference by the creator of Magic the Gathering. He was saying that the player will trust you. So we have an example that says that if you tell a player or if you tell a learner that you know what, to win in this game, you have to bang your head on the table until you pass out. They will do it because they trust you to do it. But if you fail them, you will lose the trust. So he does this, it's not nice, that sucked, period. So it is very important to remember that you can apply things in your classroom. You can experiment with gamification, but you have to be careful to make it an experience that will be enjoyable, or at least that it will have some meaning for the learner, that they will understand why you're doing that, unless you want to lose their trust and then whatever you try next, maybe they will not be so receptive. So essentially, it's a bond, it's a contract between you and the learner. You want to try something new, you want to test the way they are learning. They will be very happy to follow you, but make sure you respect them and make sure you think about it in the beginning. I'm not saying you have to get it right the first time or you have to be perfect. It's an error and trial thing, but at least try to do things that you can explain to someone why you did this and why you had this idea and what you were trying to do. Number two, instant feedback is always appreciated. This is a massive element of why games succeed. And this is something very easy also to pass into the gamification system. When you play a game, and here we have the example on the first picture, it's World of Warcraft, and the second picture is Pokemon Go. We have a leveling system, and whenever you do something in a game, you kill a monster, you finish a quest, you walk the walk, there is some sort of feedback. You gained 5 points, you gained a level, you lost something, blah, blah, blah. When you give instant feedback to someone, you incentivize them to change their behavior and reflect on the spot. So you kill a monster, you gain some points, but you wanted more, maybe you should fight a bigger monster. Or maybe this is okay, this is your level. In education, by contrast, we don't see that. People receive feedback very, very rare. I went to school in Greece, and in Greece, essentially we gain grades 3 times a year, but in those 3 times, you don't really know where you stand. You're a little bit in the dark. You get tests from time to time, but you don't have a quantifiable way of seeing how things are going. In games, you do. Every step of the way, you know, so you can adjust, and this also motivates you to engage with the process. This is something that doesn't require a lot of resources to fix or correct, but it requires a lot of preparation, and that is difficult because, as you understand, like a teacher can't give tests every day, or like be watching every student all the time and telling them, yes, now you're writing this is correct, now you're writing this is not correct. But I guess it could be a collaboration between the teachers in a school, or at least there could be steps in the middle of the way. For example, you could have a very small test, like one question, every 3 days without this affecting the grade of a student. And they can answer it, and it will be very easy for you to correct it, and then they will gain like a level of clarity, a level of I know what I'm doing here. So maybe after the classroom, you can have like, you're teaching something and you can have one question ready and you can give it out in papers, they can answer it, and you can correct it on the spot. It could be a multiple choice question, and you can gain questions online. There's a lot of resources online in every language. So essentially I would suggest trying to, in order to bring gamification in this part of the education system, I would suggest trying to incorporate essentially more feedback in a way that makes sense for the student, and also makes sense for the level of preparation you can devote yourself. Maybe you can collaborate with fellow teachers, and you can all create like a data bank of different questions that you can share. The good thing is that in my experience, educational systems, this kind of preparation compounds because the material doesn't really change from year to year. So the preparation you make one year could be used the next year, and it becomes easier on the years ahead. So it has like a major capital that you have to dedicate it of time in the first time upfront, but then it gets easier. I think your students will love it, and I think your students, it will be far easier for your students to trial and error and to fail as many times as possible, because small tests without actually affecting the final grade could be a way for them to test different answers. So I highly recommend implementing this as well. For us in Afixis, the instant feedback was coming through every simulation. So essentially in Protagoras, every court simulation lasted for 45 minutes, and on the spot, the judges we had were giving grades on a scale of 100, and this scale was split into structure of the speech, content, and expression. So the learner, we were giving 15 minutes to the judges to give like the feedback. So the learner had 45 minutes of a course simulation, and they went away 15 minutes later with clearly knowing what was going on. It took some organization, of course, and the beginning was difficult, but as I said, if you put the time up front, next time it will be easier, you will already have the system in place, etc., etc. Also, an example as well, I'm really sorry, this is in Greek, my native language, because this simulation was in Greek, but I will explain what you're seeing here. In general, this was a software we made that was for the simulation of the Hellenic Parliament. Essentially, people were submitting their ideas here. You can see a paragraph, and it says Article 1, essentially on the bottom. People were submitting their idea, and people would be able to vote from their phones. So if it was a good idea, it would get like a green color. You knew that people liked it, and you would keep it in your case. And if it wasn't, it would get like a red, or like if it was balanced, it would be like green, it would be like orange. So people were getting instant feedback from their peers as well. And this is something you can use to your advantage. You're not alone in the class. You can always use the students as well for peer review. And it is also a valuable skill to learn for them as well. In real life, peer review is more usually the case than like a superior of yours always telling you what to do. So you could encourage them to work together and to express their opinion. And at the same time, this could work as a feedback loop from them to them, which you can more easily regulate than you doing all the work and all the time giving them instant feedback. Number 3, you have to adapt the challenging factor based on your learner. This is something that starts with the realization that everyone, I think, has already come to, that people learn at different rates and through different means. There are people that prefer visual aids. There are people that prefer to listen to audiobooks or podcasts. There are people that prefer the text. They prefer to read something. And it is a difficult thing to get into the classroom because you need essentially to invest in a lot of media. But at the very least, a teacher is able to create a situation where different rates of learning could be perhaps accommodated to. An idea here would be maybe a test that has many questions of different variety, and the student could gain points by answering some of them and have like a pass rate, not necessarily by completing the entire test. Maybe those that essentially finish the harder question would get a bonus or something. So it depends on what the educational system in your country and your school is and how people are graded, how people are learning. But my suggestion is that it would be a good idea to incorporate as many media as possible. There are a lot of videos online for free. You could use YouTube videos sometimes in the classroom. This will help people that are learning visually. There are a lot of educational material for free available, or maybe books. You could recommend multiple books. When I was a student, the school was recommending a single book to read and summarize. Maybe the recommendations could be many more, and the students could pick a book that seems like more interesting to them. The reason this is important, and we are clearly seeing this from the games, is what we call rage quit. People either too bored with the easiness of the system or too enraged by the difficulty of the system that they ultimately quit. Thankfully, at schools, they are not throwing controllers or keyboards at the screen, but they eventually disassociate with the process, and you can clearly see that when they stop trying or they complain about the absurd difficulty of something. So I think it is always valuable, as a game developer would do, game designer would do, to do this in the classroom and try to adjust the leveling, essentially the difficulty of the learning process. Always keeping in mind at the end of the day, we want to teach our students. Some of them will do better, some of them will do worse, but it would be a good idea if at least all of them live with a basic knowledge of whatever it is we're teaching. Number 4 is a little bit more complicated. It's allowing the learner to explore freely within your educational world. This is something that in games, it has come more to the forefront with the advance of technology and graphics. We tend to see video games that are now what we call open world. So people can go around. It's not linear anymore. You don't have to pass level through level through level. You can just walk around, explore. Here you see a picture from 2 of my favorite games. One is the new SEGA game Sonic Frontiers. Small wink wink here. And the other one is Assassin's Creed Odyssey, which is based in ancient Greece. Small note, the Assassin's Creed games are also used in the classroom. The developers have allowed an educational mode where you can just walk around and explore Egypt or Greece or any other setting of the game, I think for free for schools. If you ask them very nicely, they will comply. I'm just mentioning this as an educational tool. But in general, the idea here is that some of the learners go above and beyond. And this is a good thing to encourage. They may follow you through the classroom, but they may want to learn more. They may have questions that are relevant to what you're discussing, but not relevant to essentially where the subject matter is going. You may be discussing a poem, and the poem may be mentioning something historical. They may raise their hand and ask, who was that guy? What was he doing? Etc., etc. Usually some teachers, because of lack of time or because they are in a rush to finish the material, or because they may not know as well, we don't know everything in this world, which makes sense. They may turn down the question and say, let's focus on what we're doing. If you have the time to prepare, or if you have the good nature to enjoy and help the students with this, you could always make a game out of it. And this is a very clear case of gamification. For example, you could tell them, that's a very nice question. How about you do your research on your own? You come back tomorrow. I'll give you 5-10 minutes to explain to the class what you found, and then I will answer as well, and I will tell you more about it. And this is a very nice way to show them that, you know what, first of all, knowledge is not linear in general. Like, you don't have to learn specific things. We're teaching you specific things because we believe that they are the basics for you to have success in life, for you to be a helpful citizen, skilled at what you want to do, and to know how the world works. But it's not the only knowledge, and there are a lot of things you can learn. It's a good attitude, especially in the 21st century, to learn how to learn rather than to learn something specific, because knowledge is created at an obscure like we learn something every day, and it would be a good idea for you to learn how to learn. And this is a great way to encourage. This is a case also where games are actually very good at compared to gamification. As I mentioned in the beginning, Civilization 4 did this very well. It had an inside encyclopedia that you could learn things, so people could pause the game and just search around things that they want to search. Nowadays, the equivalent of this that could be used in gamification is the internet. Having access to the internet, people can Google things, and you can encourage that. Or if there's not an internet connection, maybe local books, a local library would be perfect, or even a discussion, taking 5 minutes, 10 minutes from your classroom to discuss something that is of interest to the students. So in general, the transferal of the element from the games to education here would be trying to encourage your students to branch out from what you're discussing at the moment, but of course finding a way to incorporate this in a manner that doesn't stop you from actually doing your job, which is usually finishing some specific targets and teaching some specific targets. 5 to 10 minutes of encouraging a student and answering some questions is always great, and recommending materials also usually does the trick, because if someone asks you for it, chances are they will take the time on their own after school to read and learn more about this. One of my favorite principles, and things I was very lucky to witness, was allowing your learners to make the education experience personal. This is something that games excel at, especially role-playing games, where you can customize your avatar for the game. Here we see a screenshot from a very popular game called Skyrim, Elder Scrolls V Skyrim, where you're allowed to create your own character before you get into the game. It plays no role in the game itself. Maybe in this game, maybe a little bit, but generally games doesn't play a role. It's just cosmetics, but it allows the player to buy into the world because they have an avatar that looks exactly what they have in mind about their experience in the game. This principle in gamification came actually to me through sheer observation rather than design. In the Protagoras mood core simulation, in the beginning, we had allocated roles of lawyers and witnesses to the students. The witness role was more of someone introducing an argument and explaining the argument, which was based on logic. But what we observed was that students themselves were getting into the role of the witness. They were pulling out theatrics on their own. For example, someone would be the mother of the victim, and instead of arguing, they would start saying, how terrible it was, and my poor son, blah, blah, blah. Maybe they would cry a little bit. It was very fun. And what essentially this taught us was that although it didn't add specific knowledge, like our point was not to teach theatrics to the students, we're not teaching them to be actors, it did allow them to buy into the process and be more focused when they were there, and thus be more receptive to what they were learning. So role-playing is usually the way to go about here, and this can happen in the classroom as well, even with just pen and paper. You may have, especially in topics like history, civics, topics like that, humanities, it is very easy to, instead of just teaching them to host like a small court, you can assign students to do their preparation through the book that you have, and they can come back and argue a little bit. They don't have to be natural lawyers or having learned beforehand how to properly argue, but they could express their opinion, and it could be more interactive. If your students get to interact with the process, if they feel that they are actually contributing something in the process and they're not just passive about it, chances are they will be more invested, and they will pay more attention. I had the happy incident of going to an elementary school where our teacher was passionate about this, and he had a fictional topic for us. We were discussing, I remember, the fictional, let's say, stealing of Greece, that Greece left the place where it was, the actual country, and we wanted it back. And like one team was like, we should leave it where it was, and the other team was not. But for a elementary student, that was very fascinating, because we were discussing geography, and we were discussing in this mood court how, like, the benefits of changing the place in the world and geographical locations, what is the benefits of having the country in the middle of Europe instead of where it is, blah, blah, blah. So even if it is a fictional question in a topic that was not strictly humanities, it helped me remember things. I'm 30 years old, I still remember it, if you can imagine that. So I think some role-playing and some buying in from the student will take you a long way into leaving them with an impression. Of course, with the purpose of them doing the actual work later on, like being more positive to actually learn what you need them to teach. Because at the end of the day, we're not advocating that it should be all fun and games. They still have to learn specific things in the classroom. These tactics help in them being more open to them and having an extra motivation and enjoying this process. And I left the last one to be something that I believe goes a long way with everyone, with gamers, with learners, with sports fans. I think it is in our nature. People love a good competition. Learners do as well. I think it's rooted in our biology, in our psychology. We like to compete. Of course, I mean the good kind of competition. I don't mean like the brutal kind one. But you can see it everywhere. You can see like not only in gamers. I'm certain everyone here in this room knows someone who's a sports fan and they support their local team and they're very passionate about it. And this is something that the video games do very well. This is a screenshot from one of the Harry Potter games. If you're not familiar, it's the story of a boy who goes to a magical school and has adventures there with his friends. And in this school, there are houses where people like live in dormitories, and the houses gain points for things they do in class and the activities. At the end of the year, the class with the most points wins. This is also, according to my experience, very easy to implement in a school. First of all, there are breaks usually that people can play games, so they can get into teams. But these teams can also be featured in the classroom. You could potentially split the students into teams and they can do collective work. They can solve like a test all together, or they have to prepare a presentation. And you could have like a small point system, like when a team wins, they can gain something. At the end of the year, maybe they would win an award. It doesn't have to be something expensive. Maybe it would be just the honor of winning. For a student, for a young adult, it is important as well. Maybe they would gain something inside the school. Maybe you could award them extra points in the final grades. You can make it as imaginative as you want. I think the added benefit to this is that they learn to work in groups, which is a very valuable skill nowadays, to be able to work with people, especially people you may not necessarily like. And this would also be a way in class to solve differences. If they have to work together, maybe they could be pressured in a good sense to get closer to the people that they thought they didn't like. So it aids in understanding one another and solving differences in a more, let's say, fun way. Apart from the normal test and normal task work, you can make it as, you can let your imagination run wild. You could task them to prepare a case or to make a small film if they have the means with their phones. They don't need to get cameras or something expensive. And you can keep track. They can name the teams, which adds to the buy-in. They could have fun with it, like they can pick their colors, as long as they build the sense of camaraderie and of being on a team. In general, based on all this observations and my experience, the point of gamification is that there are a lot of ways to achieve it. So these were some of the ideas, some of the things I have personally seen through my experience. But games continue to evolve, and our interaction with games does as well. And I don't mean only video games, games themselves, playing. The concept of playing has been around since the dawn of time. Very famously, we have found dice made out of bone in caves. But at the end of the day, it is up to you to decide, as I was saying in the beginning, how to integrate the fun and enjoyment that comes from games and the motivation that comes from games in your own classroom. I always suggest to teachers that it would be a good idea to do this in collaboration with other teachers in the school. Maybe you will have different ideas. You could pick one yourself, another teacher could pick another one. You can test them in the classroom, maybe exchange notes afterwards, see what works, what doesn't, instead of just trying to achieve it on your own. Or if there is no buy-in from other teachers, you can do it on your own, of course. You don't have to spend a lot of money or time. You can Google things online, you can find assets online, or you can make your own stuff up just using pen and paper. That's fine. The basic thing is that we're trying to achieve this motivation that games give us. And it's always nice to remember that there is a reason why games achieve that. They allow us to try so many times and win when we make it. They allow us to explore things. They allow us to be who we are, to imagine a different version of ourselves and project that into the real world. And my passion for gamification stems exactly from this, from finding out how we can achieve these great elements that we find in games, how we can achieve this in real life, and especially in education. I hope this has been valuable to you as well. If you want to find out more, if you want to connect, here is the link to my organization, my email, and my LinkedIn. I will also be more than happy to paste them in the chat. And I think this is the point where we'll have any questions. If I'm not mistaken, Natasha, I would be very happy to answer any
thank
of them.
you. Thank you so much, Thomas, for all the great things you shared with us. I kept a lot of notes of the interesting things that you said. The one thing that I personally wanted to mention is that when you spoke about the roles, that the different roles that the students were instinctively taking during the Protagoras Moot Court, you said that some of them had to be the parents, the witnesses, and they were very good at getting into the role. Despite the fact that this does not seem to teach them something like a concrete piece of knowledge, it is essential for the development of their soft skills. It teaches students a lot of skills. It teaches them empathy. It teaches them collaboration. It teaches them understanding. It teaches them a lot of things that they will be very, very valuable for the future. And we don't, in a traditional, let's say, education system, we don't get the opportunity to teach them a lot in class. So I wouldn't discourage my students from expressing themselves and getting into roles. It's still them, it's still their brain that creates all of this. And sometimes, being disconnected from who you really are opens up the horizons to get more input. I couldn't agree more with a lot of things you said, like that learners love competition. For the students, for the teachers who hear us, from my personal experience, when it comes to games in class, the only thing I would have to say, like a little tip, if I could give it a little tip, would be like, especially for teenagers, avoid very long duration of games. Teenagers do not have the willingness to stay a lot in a game, no matter how fun they have with it. Keep it short and snap. They get more, and they, especially nowadays with instant gratification, they cannot wait until the end of the term to get these points in the final exam. It's better to give them, little challenges every week that they need to complete. So this is, from my experience, what I wanted to add to the discussion. And now we can open it to the participants for questions, comments, remarks.
Perfect.
Maybe experiences of when people have, used elements of gamification in their classrooms or projects. We would be happy to hear. Anybody? No? Hello, Evgenia.
Hello. I would like to ask what are the challenges, in your opinion, that the teacher has to face if he or she decides to practice the gamification in their classrooms?
Thank you for your question. That is actually a great question. There are many challenges. It depends on what you are, what essentially feature of gamification you're putting forward. For example, if you are trying to give instant feedback to the students through various tests or questions or finding materials, the most immediate challenge is that you have to find out this material. You have to find this material. You have to curate it as well. You can't just give the students whatever you find on the internet. And you have to spend the time answering questions and putting forward these tests, etc. There are smart ways to do this and work around, especially if you collaborate with other teachers, but you need to spend a lot of time, and normally more time than you would spend in your normal line of duty, let's say. At the same time, many of the students may be the challenge themselves. So, okay, I don't want to say that it will be so successful that they will demand it all the time, but they will get used to it. So if you make the change, if you make a change to a gamification feature, be sure to make it like a normal part, something that you offer as a teacher throughout the educational activity. If you engage them, it's very fun, it's amazing, like for a month, and then you return to the old system, you may see a setback from their participation because they will now be accustomed to something great. They can see that education can be amazing and be great, things like that. If on the other hand, you're not careful and you implement something that you think may be fun, but at the time it may be tiring in the end. Let me rephrase that. Be sure, essentially, the challenge is to monitor how the students are accepting step by step, because if there is a mistake, if something turns out not to be that much fun or goes the other way around, be sure to pull it quickly, because if it continues, it is the first principle I was talking about. You will lose the capital of trust that you had with your students. The point of gamification is to help them and create a bigger motivation, not essentially to put more work on them and just make them do more things. Where they would do one thing, now they suddenly have to do 5 things, 6 things. And I have seen this happening at the school, that they try to switch, for example, to a more project-based education instead of just tests and just the thing. But the problem was that they were having so many projects that actually students started lagging behind. At the same time, because they had to prepare this, they involved their parents as well into the process. So the parents were helping the students. It got too much for the parents as well, because they started spending that much more time at home preparing the projects, sometimes for the students. And it led to general discontent. So make sure that it is a balanced approach when implementing it. It's fine to have a moot court and you have to prepare. Maybe if you have 10 moot courts in a month and they have to prepare for all of them, it's too much. So try to figure out how much time things take from students on average. And the last thing I would say as a challenge is make sure that everyone is included, or at least if everyone does not particularly like enjoy a specific approach, at least they could be part of it and they can go through it. Because if there's something, I will give an extreme example here. Like if you have an activity that requires a pool and people are swimming, if someone doesn't swim or he hasn't learned how to, they will not be able to participate. They will immediately be excluded. They may start feeling resentment, or they may be open to being pinpointed by their classmates as someone who can't do things. So make sure whatever you implement has as a basis skills or the ability, an ability that all of the students share at a specific level. They can participate. Another example of this, I think more close to real life, is that if your activity requires expensive material that the students have to procure, some of the students may not be able to procure it. This excludes them. So either try to procure it through the school or through funding from NGOs, or maybe do something that doesn't require them to expend so much. I think this is a better example than the pool one.
No, but it's very clear and you're very right. And I wanted to say on that sometimes teachers, when we make games, let's be honest, we have particular students in our minds to play specific parts in the game. Like, this person is strong in writing, he will write the script of the game, or this person is very good with speaking, he will do the presentation, etc., etc. There is always roles for everybody. There is the role of observer, there is a role for supporter, there is the role of the person who keeps the papers and reads with the classmate in case in case a strong one forgets something. I remember now, as you were speaking, I was thinking that I'm not much of a gamer, have played some games, but not many, but I have been in environments with gamers, and I clearly remembered the experience. Like, I remember sitting next to my cousin and him playing the game. I did learn, like, if that was an educational experience, I would have learned something just being the observer of the game. So I would say my advice would be try to include there are roles for everybody. Even what in your mind seems silly, it will be valuable for the student, and he will or she will be feeling involved. And this is what we want in reality.
Exactly. Very fair point.
Thank you both.
All right, we are to Tutku. Am I pronounced it correctly? Okay.
Yes, you're
Hello.
right. I also wanted to ask about the creating good competition environment, because it's sometimes so hard to creating a good competition, because some of the students may be a little bit more ambitious than others, and it's too hard to find the balance. How can we find it? How can we create the healthy competition environment?
Perfect question, and a very hard one. I don't have a perfect answer, I'm afraid. I can't give you like an amazing formula that you can build a perfect system everyone will participate. There are some thoughts on my mind. First of all is that I believe that when we're using a competition environment, we should make it, let's say, net positive. For example, when you're awarding grades, when they're participating in a test, usually it feels like a negative experience because you're losing things. So you start with an upper, let's say, grade of 20, and if you fail, you get less points. Maybe the competition would be the reverse, like they do things in the competition, they win things, but they don't lose things. So don't essentially punish people for not going well in the competition, or maybe there would be multiple opportunities to recompete. Also, the teacher can foster an environment of taking the competition half serious, half fun. So someone will win, but it's okay. You're not going to be affected in the grades. The point of it is having fun. A lot of essentially the mood rests on you on creating the right mood. This is very easy to go astray. So it is very easy for a teacher who is competitive as well and who wants to reinforce competitiveness to go on the other hand and say, okay, let's do this, we must participate, it matters, try your best. And it could lead to the other way. It is also very helpful to have, let's say, supporting roles ready for people that may not be so willing to participate, may not be very well. So, for example, you host a competition and I'm trying to find a concrete example. If it was a racing competition, let's say, maybe someone who can't race could be your helper or could help organize the competition so they could learn like another skill without participating. In classroom, maybe if they are collaborating on the project, you could take a look at what skills they already have. So someone who is, if you have two people that are good in making the presentations, maybe they shouldn't be on the same team, they should be on different teams so they could share the skill. So it rests again on your own preparation before implementing the competition, to take a look at the lay of the land and, let's say, fix positions. It doesn't sound very nicely, but we're doing this for the good of the students, so that everyone will get the most out of the competition. And always remind them that there's also next time and you can organize things as well. And I think the most important thing for me was the first one. Don't let them feel that they will lose something. I think this is also, apart from sounding negative, it is also a part of behavioral psychology, that people who get into the position of actually losing things, like you are in a situation where you are fearing you will lose things, gets you on the defensive, and you suddenly stop making rational decisions, you feel stress, you get on the other side. We want the students, I personally believe, we want the students to feel that they are venturing out, that it's a brave new world. We want to find things out, we want to adventure without the fear of loss. And this is actually something video games do amazingly well, because even if you lose a million times, you can always respawn, you can always go back. I think this is the most crucial element in forming a competition. If your students feel that we're losing and what am I going to do, and I have lost like points and this will affect my grades and my time, blah, 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 it's not going very well.
Thank you.
Very well. Eugenia?
I would just like to add that I think that gamification is very important because it's very important for the children to learn how to lose. It's not bad to lose, and also how to manage the defeat. And also that it's important to learn that even if they lose a game or a competition or whatever, they are earning things through the experience of that. So I think because they are learning how to collaborate, how to expand their skills, or I don't know, whatever. So there are a lot of things, even when you lose, there are a lot of things that you earn. So through the games and the competitions, you are learning how to focus on the good things in each experience, I think.
I agree
Very, very
completely.
true.
This is very true. Let me make a small clarification. This is very true, and you should incorporate in the competition. I was talking more about losing actual things that they had for granted. So if they are competing and this may affect the grade itself, for example, it would make the difference in the final grade, they may feel that there's a risk here. It would be a good idea if we eliminate risk. Of course, at the same time, with keeping the gaming element, which in a game you can lose, of course. Like you should learn to accept defeat. You should learn to be gracious about it, things like that. I just feel that it would be a good idea for them not to put, not to include risk with that. It would be ideal if the student can feel that they can fail, they can lose again and again until they become better.
Perfect. We are 4 minutes after 8 here in Athens, after 6 in London, and what time it is at the areas that people come from in this workshop. But it is time to say goodbye, to thank Thomas for all this very important and valuable information he gave us. I think we all have a lot of food for thought for now. We will make sure to maybe organize something else, deep dive a little bit on gamification. It is a very important and interesting topic, and I'm sure you will all see great benefits if you incorporate it in your classes.
Thanks for having me, Natasha. It has been great. Let me put my details in the chat for anyone interested in more information about our organization and the activities we have been doing. We collaborate with a lot of schools, and we aim, especially for the schools, we aim to bring Protagoras to the schools. The Model Hellenic Parliament is mostly for university students, if I'm honest. But Protagoras is something that can be very easily implemented in a school, just pen and paper. All the materials are free on our site. This is the site for Protagoras as well.
Thomas, is it just in English, in Greek, or they can find it in English?
The main site is in English, Afixis.org. I think Protagoras may be in Greek per se, but we will be very happy to create material and send in English as well.
Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for attending this workshop and for your time this afternoon. We will see you very soon in the next one.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Cheers.
Thank you. See you.